For many legions, we are forced to wonder at how truest loyalty can be turned to treachery, purest devotion to hate, nobility to wickedness. But for the Night Lords, we must ask if their hearts always belong to darkness.
Jack, do I have to keep on doing this? The hair keeps getting in my mouth.
Created with a higher purpose, perhaps their end could have been different, but their history is one of poisoned ideology and atrocity. Greetings, friends.
I am Duncan Roads, and this book is one of the greatest books that Games Workshop has ever made. This is one of the original Horus Heresy books, and they're amazing because for me they embody all the coolest stuff. The rules are long out of date as far as the different editions go, but the lore is amazing and it has that strange pseudo-historical nature that makes the Horus Heresy so compelling. Now when this book came out, you started getting all sorts of interesting units for the different legions that were all made in resin, made by Forge World. But this is quite a long time ago, and these miniatures are all quite small compared to the modern figures. And the Night Lords are no different, and if there's one thing that terrifies me beyond all things the Night Lords could possibly do to somebody, it's when my Wargames miniatures are out of scale. So in this video, what we're going to do is show you a great method of how you can convert and paint your very own Night Raptor. So let's start out by taking a look at the core kits I'm going to be using to make this conversion, and there's two principal sets that I'm going to be using. The first is this one right here. This is the Mark 6 Assault Squad. This is ideal for Night Lords because their armour has a nice sleek look about it, so this is going to be ideal for a squad like Night Raptors. But the plan is to build a core body of that and then add parts on from another kit, which is this one right here. This is the Nemesis Claw Kill Team. It's basically a squad of Night Lords Chaos Space Marines. This set's great if you're doing a Night Lords Legion army because it has in it essentially a Night Lords upgrade sprue, which is fantastically useful for all kinds of different pieces across your army. Now inside that box is also a full squad of Chaos Space Marines, so if you're not interested in that, what you can do is just sell it on eBay and make some of your money back, but you might want to keep it for veteran bits. The choice of course is yours. But that Night Lord sprue is fantastic, and I got it just here, and the reason why it's so great is because on here you get loads of shoulder pads with Night Lord symbols on there, you get loads of cool heads, so you can see you've got a bunch around here, and there's a whole ton more down here as well. There's lots of Night Lord style weapons like a Nostraman chain glaive, and there is a set of lightning claws which I am going to be using later on. So what we need to do first of all is make the core body that we're going to stick some of these bits on, and that core body is going to be this one just here. A good set of Mark 6 power armor for an Assault Marine. Now what I want to do with this is start out by raising it up on some rocks just to make this guy look a little bit different from a regular Assault Marine. And if you're going to do that with some Space Marines and power armor, then what I recommend you do, rather than sticking rocks onto the base, is instead stick them to the feet of the miniature, because this way you can make sure the foot is properly planted on it. So to do that, what we're going to do is just get a little bit of glue, and I've got some super glue here on the underside of the foot, so just there, don't need very much, and then get your rocks and just choose some bits of slate that have got a nice flat surface like this one just here, for example. It's just a matter of gluing it on like this. Once you're happy with those larger stones stuck underneath the feet, the next thing to do is glue this onto the base of the miniature. So once again, we just need a bit of super glue underneath the stones this time. So just there as well, and then loosely put it into position on the base. Now, once the glue is dry, whilst the model will be secure, there will be gaps. So just use a little bit more super glue and some smaller stones just to fill in those gaps. And here we have the result. Now there's a little bit of misting from the super glue, but that's okay. That'll disappear as soon as we undercoat this piece. But you can see by putting the rocks onto the feet first, it definitely really plants the Marine firmly on the ground there. And so with that done, we can now move on to the really fun part of adding on some cool Night Lordy themed parts there. So to do this, what I'm going to do is start out with the arms. Here I'm using the lightning claws from the Nemesis Claw set, just taking time to make sure we get them into a cool pose. Next we can glue on the shoulder pads, and I'm starting with a blank one that's got some flayed skin on it, which I just sort of bent back a little bit to fit around the lightning claw. As for the other one, I'm going for one with a Night Lords Legion symbol upon it. With this done, I'm just going to add a few accessories around the waist. With those arms now glued on, we can move on to the next thing, which is going to be to add a jump pack onto the back. And here we could, of course, just use one of the Mark 6 jump packs, but I want this guy to look different from a regular assault marine. So instead, what I'm going to do is take a look at the design of jump pack that appears on the Forge World Night Raptor kit. And that is the same design of the jump packs that appear on the 40k Raptors. So what I did was hop onto eBay and look for some of those from some bits traders, and I did find a bag. In fact, I got this little set just here, and I built one of them up, and here we have the jump pack that we're going to use. Really nice design. The twin turbines look really cool, really iconic. And what we need to do is glue this onto the back of the Space Marine. Now the fits are completely different, so we are going to have to do a little bit of cutting here to make everything fit together. And this is going to begin by first of all just trimming down some of the details we got on the back of the armor to get a smoother surface. So just clip some bits away. Then I'm going to be doing the same sort of thing on the fitting of the jump pack, just cutting away some of the parts on the inside of that. And then it's just a matter of cutting and adjusting until the two parts can be glued together. And here it is glued on, and I found that actually a really good contact point was just here at the back of the collar, just going into that jump pack right there. So it's glued there, and we've also got a good connection point where these pipes meet the back just down there. Now there is a little bit of a gap on the underside, but thankfully the great big shoulder pads of a Space Marine cover that nicely. So I'm really happy with that. It means the last thing to do is to glue on the head of the Space Marine. Now once again, I'm going to use one of the Night Lords heads from the Nemesis Claw set, and for this we just need to be careful putting it in. So it's a matter of just putting some glue on there, then jimming it into position. The fit isn't perfect because of the large cables that appear over the shoulders of the Assault Marine, but it's just a matter of working it into position and then finding a pose that looks particularly terrifying. And speaking of terror, if you sometimes find miniature painting to be terrifying, then what you should do is check out DuncanRoads.com. This is our home on the internet. It's our website that's packed with over 400 painting tutorials covering all kinds of different subjects and focusing on specific techniques as well. This is in addition to our 17-part course focused on the fundamentals of miniature painting. So if you're new to the hobby, this will get you off to a great start as you begin your journey learning to paint your miniatures. And you can also chat to other members on our forum and our members-only Discord. And this thriving community is always posting pictures of their progress as they learn to paint more of their miniatures. Now, we also run a challenge every month where we pick a particular subject and we challenge you to have a go at painting something for it to win one of the coveted pins. And we also do a monthly giveaway as well. And you get access to all of this for just the price of a posh cup of coffee a month. So if you want to banish the terror of painting your miniatures, be sure to check it out. And here is our Night Raptor, or fully built. And I always like to leave the head as the last part to be glued on here because it determines so much about the pose. In this case, you can see I've made sure to lean it forward as if he's like leering, and really suits the predatory character of these miniatures doing that. And I've made sure to lean it ever so slightly to look like he's throwing his weight towards starting a charge. But I'm really happy with that, so we can move on. Now, obviously for this example, we use some lightning claws because it really suits the character of Night Lords, and these ones look particularly cool, but you can of course use all sorts of weapons. There's all the assault ones you get inside that assault squad, plus there's all the cool ones on that Night Lord sprue. And if you wanted to, you could even use some of the Chaos Space Marine ones. But essentially, building a squad like this is really easy, fun, and ends up with something totally unique and customized for you. So what we're now going to do is move on to painting the miniature. So we need to undercoat this. I'm going to go for a grey undercoat. So I'm going to go outside now, spray it with standard grey from the Colour Forge. When we come back, we'll start painting him. And here he is, undercoated with standard grey and ready to go. So what we're going to do for painting this miniature is start out by painting that blue power armour. And for this example here, I thought it'd be really cool to actually go for a really dark blue metallic colour. Because in that book that we were showing earlier, it actually is sort of like that in the artwork. So I want to reflect that in the miniature just here. So the plan for doing it is to start out by painting the armour with a blue metallic and then to apply some thin contrast paint over the top to really deepen the colour, really darken it down as well. So the metallic blue I'm going to use to get things started is some enchantment blue, and to apply it, I'm just going to go for a rough base coating brush to quickly paint this across the armour. So here I have a medium base coat brush from Citadel. As usual, I'm just going to thin the paint down with just a touch of water, and then it's all a matter of just blocking in those armour panels. So for example, on the breastplate just here, I'm just going to start blocking this in at this stage. And here we have the initial blue applied. Now it's nice and shiny, but it is much too light for a Night Lord, so we need to darken this down. And as I mentioned, what I'm going to do is use some Citadel contrast paint for this. Now I'm going to be using some levied on blue, which is a really nice deep blue, but it's very strong straight out the bottle. So I'm going to dilute it and apply it as 2 thin coats instead, just to give a slightly more controlled application. So what we need to do is prepare that on the palette. To do so, I'm using a size 2 brush from Artisopus, so a little bit larger than a medium layer brush, but any brush of this kind of size will be absolutely fine for this. What we need to do is just get some of this onto the palette where you can see what I mean. It's a really dark, really strong colour. So I'm just going to get 1 brush full of water, mix that into it there like that to get the diluted version of the paint. And what we're aiming for is something like that. Now when it comes to applying this kind of thing, if you've not used a contrast paint before, you might be under the impression that it's a lot like a wash where you can just sort of slap it on. For best results, it's actually better to apply it in a more careful, controlled fashion, a bit like colouring with felt tip pens, where you pick one panel at a time, basically work your way gradually across it, then leave it be and let it settle. And if you do that, you'll get a much smoother finish. So to show that in practice, you can see I'm not getting loads and loads of this paint on the brush. And what I'm going to do is just pick one panel. So for example, the breastplate right here. What we do is pick a starting point in one corner and then just smoothly apply the colour straight over the top. Just keeping the brush on it, smoothly applying it there like that, and then leaving it be and letting it settle as it will. And there we go. Get that nice darkish blue, and also we get some nice shading in the recesses. So what I'm going to do now is just carry on applying this over one panel at a time, and then I'm going to give it around about half an hour to dry. Once that's completely dry, we can then apply a second coat of the same colour in the exact same way. So once again, this is levied on blue, which I've thinned down. And again, just one panel at a time. We just want to smoothly apply this over the top. And now that second coat is dry as well, we have the result of that really deep blue metallic armour. Looking perfect for a Night Lord. So now we're going to move on to the next stage, which is to start the process of picking out some of the smaller details. And the first of these is going to be that trim. Now for the base coat here, I'm going to use some Battle Axe Brass, that really sort of very pale gold kind of colour. And to apply it, I'm going for a size 0 brush now, so a little bit smaller than a normal medium layer from Citadel, but it's got a good point on it and good for doing this sort of detail work, because we do need to be careful here to keep away from that blue metallic armour. So you can see what I'm doing is making sure the paint's thin down and under control there on the brush, and then it's a matter of looking for all the decorations that we can find on the armour. The obvious one is going to be the trim on the shoulder plates, so you can see just around here what we want to do is just pick out this detail here, just being really careful as we get close to the blue. Here we have all that trim base coated, so now we're going to move on to applying 2 more base coat colours that can all be sharing the same colour wash at the same time, including all that trim that we've done. And that one's going to be a brown wash, so what we should look to do now is to paint in any red details. And for this, I'm going to be using some Sanguine Scarlet. With that done, we can then move on to bone details, and here I'm going to be using some Dragon Fang. But we'll start out with Sanguine Scarlet, and again I'm going to use my size 0 brush to apply this, and the main thing to do here is to get the wings on the Legion badge on the shoulder plate. So with this thinned down and ready, just making sure there's not loads of paint on the brush there, we can start picking this out, and this detail is a little small, so you can see that's why I've just taken care to make sure there's not much paint on the brush. And like with that trim, we want to very carefully go in and to start picking out this raised detail, just making sure we're very gentle with the brush so it just catches that raised up area. Next up, we can base coat the skull in the middle, and for this I'm using some Dragon Fang. So once again, we just need to carefully apply this, and at the same time keep an eye out for any other skulls in the miniature, such as these ones that are on the lightning claws. And there we go, with those colours applied, we can now put a wash over the top of them. And in this case, what we need is that dark brown wash. So I'm going to use some Battle Mud wash, and to apply it, I'm sticking with the size 0 brush here. And in the application here, we just need to be careful, just like the base coats, to make sure we don't splash it onto that metallic blue armour. So you don't need to put loads on your brush at once. So you can see I'm just using the palette to gauge exactly how much is on there. And then what we want to do is paint this straight over the top. So for example, on the Legion badge, we want to make sure we get it over the skull just there, being careful as we get to the edges of it. Same on the wings too, just gently applying it there over the top, but also we want to make sure that we get that brass trim, and here it's just a matter of again painting it over the top and letting it run into the recesses. With that wash now dry, we can move on to the next selection of base coats that this time are going to be sharing a black wash. And the first of these should be the silver. For this, I'm going to be using some Cerakote silver. Then we'll move on to black details like cables and joints in the armour, that sort of thing. And for this, we'll go for an off black that we can shade down with the black wash. So here I'm going to use some Death Reaper. Finally, it'll then be time to apply that black wash in the same sort of controlled fashion that we just did with the brown. So here I'm going to use Oblivion black wash. But first we'll need the silver. So I'm going for Cerakote silver here, and to apply it, I'm sticking with the size 0 brush. And with this, we just need to look around for all the silver details and block them in. So again, make sure the paint's under control on your brush, and then we can start looking around for these features. Some are quite obvious, for example, the claws just along here, but also we want to make sure we get all the mechanical details, especially around the jump pack here. So just be sure to get details like this at this stage too. Next up, it's time to base coat black details, and for this I'm using some Death Reaper. And there's a few different things to get here, starting out with the joints in the armour, such as around here. Also, I'm going to be base coating leather details, such as this little pouch, and I'm keeping an eye out for any cables too, such as these ones that we've got on the legs, such as around there. And then with that done, we can move on to applying a black wash over the top of these two colours. So here I'm using Oblivion black wash, still being applied to the size 0 brush, and we just want to neatly paint it straight over the top. With that wash now dry, we can move on to the next phase of painting the miniature, which is going to be jumping straight into highlighting it. And for this, I'm going to be starting out with that dark blue metallic armour. For the highlight here, we can actually go back to the original colour that we used, so enchantment blue, because remember, that contrast paint has darkened things down quite a bit, so there's definitely enough contrast here. And to apply it, I'm going for a small brush now. I'm going for a size 00 here from Artisopus, which is about the same sort of size as a small airbrush from Citadel. Because with this, we're going to be doing some edge highlighting on the armour. So the trick for this is to make sure the paint's thinned down, so it's nice and smooth, not too runny, about that sort of consistency just there. Then it's going to remove the excess off the brush so it's only a small amount, and then with this, I'm going to start looking for all the edges and angles on the dark blue parts of the miniature. I'm just going to follow them all the way around. So for example, on the leg just here, because you're using the side of the brush, I'm just going to skim this colour along that sharp corner there to get a nice highlight just running around that edge. I'm going to be looking for all the edges, such as these ones down here towards the bottom of the leg too, where I'm just going in with the tip of the brush now and just following that edge around there like that. Always changing the angle of the miniature to make sure I'm comfortable and I'm painting in this natural downward motion, because this way there's a lot of control as we follow along those edges. So it's going to take a little bit of time, this one, but it's a matter of just being as neat as you can if you're doing this technique. Just take your time and follow those edges as neatly as you can. And with that done, we've got some nice highlights there on that blue armour. So it's time to move on to the next thing to highlight, which is going to be the other two metallics. And what we'll do is start out with that trim. In this case, I'm going to use some platinum crown. And then for the silver details, we want a very bright silver. So here I'm going for mithril blade. But I'm going to be starting out by using some platinum crown, and to apply it I recommend sticking with a small brush again. So I'm back to the size 00 here, and that's because the technique this time is going to be basically the same thing as what we just did with that edge highlighting. So just like before, we need to make sure that paint's nice and thin and under control, and then it's a matter of looking for those edges and corners on the miniature. Now when it comes to the inside of the shoulder pad trim here, I'm going to be using the tip of the brush just to carefully follow along like this, always making sure to turn the model just to make sure you're nice and comfortable, so you can do that downward motion to follow that line. But when it comes to the outer part of the shoulder pad trim, it's actually quite easy to approach the side of the brush, and you can see by just doing this and skimming along, we can get a sharp highlight in those parts really quickly and easily. And with that now done, we can move on to highlighting the silver, and here I'm using some mithril blade, which I'm going to be applying in the exact same way on all the silver details. And now that's done, we've finished highlighting all the metallics. So it's time to highlight some of the smaller details, and we'll start out with those black cables and joints and things. Here I'm going to be using a dark grey, so I'm going to use some Dungeon Stone Grey. Then it'll be time to highlight the red that we've got on the Legion symbol. So here I'm going to use some Demon Red, and then finally we can finish off those skulls. Here we're going to start out with some Skeleton Legion before moving on to a fine highlight with Vampire Fang. But first of all, we need that dark grey, so I'm using Dungeon Stone Grey, and to apply it I'm going for the small brush again, so back to the size 00, and with this we just need to pick out some of the raised parts on the ridges that we've got on these cables and pipes and joints and things like that. So don't need very much of the paint, but you do need that fine point there on the brush. And then with this, first of all, on the joints of the armour, you can see we've got these ridges just here. So what you want to do for these is just angle the model so you're nice and comfortable. With the tip of the brush, just go in and just pick out a few that catch the light. So for example, these just here, then it's going going to be the same thing on the cables, such as this one on the side of the helmet, where again we just want to pick out the raised parts of the ridges along the length of it there, like that. Next up, we can move on to the Legion badge, and here we're going to start out with the bright red. So here I've got some Demon Red still being applied to the size 00 brush, and I'm going to be highlighting the wings by picking out the fingers on them, so you can see these lengths that we've got going across them there and there, but also we're going to be getting the outer edge of them as well. Next up, we can concentrate on the skulls, and here I'm starting out with some Skeleton Legion. And whilst I'm still using a small brush here, this is more or less going to be some layering, where we just want to apply it smoothly onto the forehead of the skeleton there like that, then skip past any recesses as we get down to the face. So it means just going around the eye sockets, around the nose just there, and then picking out the teeth down here. And then finally we can add a highlight onto these skulls with a lighter bone colour. So here I'm using some Vampire Fang, and with this to begin with we just want to go across the top of the head, so just a line along there, and then we want to pick out the raised details around the face, such as the brow, once again around the eye sockets and the nose and the teeth. And there we are, that's done too. So now the model is well on the way to completion. There's just some smaller things that we need to paint in now, and we'll start out with the eye lenses, and here I'm going to go for a glowing red effect. So to do this, first of all, I made sure the eye lenses are nice and dark. So I just basically ran a little bit of a black wash into there just to darken them down a bit more. And what we're going to do now is introduce some white in the middle of the eye lens. So here I'm going to use some white star. Once that's on there, I'm then going to apply some red glaze over the top. But we'll start out with white star, and to apply it I'm sticking to the small brush, so it's the size 00 again, and with this we're just looking to paint a white line on the raised up detail in the middle of the lens. Now on these sorts of Chaos Space Marine helmets it's actually nice and straightforward to do this because the lens does bulge out a little bit, but still brace your hands to be as steady as possible like this, gently move in and just paint a line on that raised section right in the middle. Once you're happy with that white, we can then move on to a red glaze. Now, if you don't have access to red glaze, then Blood Angel's Red from Citadel is a great alternative, and whichever you choose, all you want to do is introduce a small amount of it over that white and into the recess around it. So just there like that. And there we have the glowing red eyes, so it's time to move on to the next detail, which is going to be the flayed skin on the shoulder pad. Now for this, I'm going to start out with a pale flesh tone. I'm going to use some elven skin for this, and then for the wash, I'm going to be using some flesh wash to give it a little bit of warmth. Now once that's done, we can then layer it with some elven skin to clean things up, and then for the highlight, I'm going to go quite pale with some Vampire Fang. But first we'll need that base coat, so I'm using elven skin, and to apply it I'm going for a size 1 brush here, and all we've got to do for this first step is just block the entire thing in. So it's just a matter of getting that paint thinned down, under control on the brush, and we can neatly start base coating this on. And we're looking at this detail right here. Like with the other base coats early on, all we've got to do is make sure we get a nice even coating to it whilst being careful of that metallic blue. With the base coat done, the next thing to do is apply a wash over the top. So here I'm using some flesh wash applied again with a size 1 brush, and it's just a matter of neatly painting it straight over this skin. With that wash now completely dry, it's time to return to the original colour. So here I'm back to some elven skin, but this time I'm applying it with the size 0 brush because we need just a little bit more accuracy. That's because this time we're looking to aim at these flatter regions whilst being careful to avoid recesses so as to retain the definition that we got from the wash. And then finally, I'm going to finish off the skin with some Vampire Fang. Now for this, I'm using the size 00 brush for lots of accuracy. And to start out with, we need to pick out the peaks of the creases in the skin, such as around there, but also we can use this colour to pick out the stitches too. And there we go, that flayed skin's highlighted, so now what we can do is add some blood on it to make it extra grizzly. So for this I'm going to be using some blood for the blood god, and to apply it I've gone back to my size 0 brush. Now when using the blood paint like this, what I like to do is thin it down just to make it a little bit weaker, and then apply it as a few coats just to build it up, and this way you get a nice little sort of variety in how thick and how strong the colour is across the skin. We don't want to cover the whole thing, but instead concentrate more around the edges of it. So once that paint's thinned down to about this sort of consistency, we can start to do that, and if we take a look around here, That means we just want to make sure that we still get it on the outside edge, just dotting it along there like that, and then bring it up in small amounts onto the flat of the skin. So just dotting there like that. Now, as it dries, you'll be able to then return to it with a second coat, and this time when you start dotting it on, you'll find the red in those areas is going to be a little bit stronger. So by building it up, you can get some really nice, interesting effects on it there like that. Now, in addition, we can use some of this blood on the lightning claws, and if you want to do this, all you need to do is just load some up and then apply it in a sort of flicking motion across the blade like this in the direction of the impact if you were slicing at somebody. So just there like that. Once again, building it up so we get the red a little bit stronger towards the middle. And there we are, the blood's been applied, so now it's time to move on to the final detail, which is going to be to add some lightning onto the armour. And of course, being a Night Lord, you've got to have that lightning effect for it. And to do it, I'm going to be using two colours. I'm going to start out with some ray gun glow, so a really light turquoise, and then we're going to add some white over the top with some white star. But we need to start out with ray gun glow, and to apply this, you definitely want to go for your finest brush. So I'm back down to my size 00. And when it comes to painting the lightning, I recommend you don't let yourself get too carried away with it and put it all over the miniature. Instead, you just want it in a few select areas on each one, because in this sort of thing, less is more really. If you do it all over the place, it looks a little bit, well, too much. It's too distracting. So what we're going to do is pick maybe 3 or so, maybe 4 armour panels. And what you do, once you've got that paint thinned down under control, is bring the bristles to a fine point, and then it's all about just painting some jagged lines on the area you want the lightning to be. So I'm going to add some onto the breastplate just here, and what we're going to do is just start towards the top, and it's just a matter of just painting these little straight lines like this. Now, they're going to be quite faint on the first pass, but that's exactly what we want, because if any mistakes happen, they don't really stand out very much. And it means that once you've got that initial pattern on there, you just go back and go straight over the top, and this way you'll get that stronger colour appearing there like that. So don't think about it too much, just do these little jagged lines, just breaking up into small little sections every now and then, and just work your way across the armour panel. And then finally, it's time to move on to a white. So here I've got some white star, and with this, we just want to add in some dots where some of these lines come together, and on some of the thicker lines, just a few very fine lines in the centre of them too. And with this done, it's then time to base the miniature. As he's standing on a lot of rubble, I'm going to go for an urban rubble base. And with the base now fully painted, this Night Raptor is complete and ready to sow terror across the Imperium of the False Emperor. So making a model like this is tons of fun, and if like me you don't like the older miniatures being a little bit smaller than the modern ones, it's actually a fun challenge to do as well, especially with the Night Lords, because there's loads of interesting bits you can combine together to create these miniatures and give them loads of character and things too. And then when it comes to painting them, it's really fun with all the grisly trophies and things like that that you can add to them. Now if you are going to paint your miniature like we've shown here, then remember the key part is about applying that contrast paint over the top of the blue metallic. You've got to make sure you thin it down with a little bit of water and colour in one panel at a time to ensure you get a nice smooth consistency before you move on. But aside from that, painting the miniature is very straightforward. So I really hope this video has given you some inspiration for your own Legion, and we'll see you again very soon.